Ever heard of Concord? It's not exactly popular. Matter of fact, it is one of the worst game releases of all time. And no, we're not talking about a game from the 80s or 90s that got buried in a dump somewhere. Nor are we talking about some obscure release from the 2000s that was so bad it never even made it to digital. This game was released recently. I mean, like August of 2024 recently. So why is it not more popular? And why is the gameplay you're seeing here not of Concord? Well, easy. They shut it down. Almost immediately. It was pulled offline at the beginning of September, just 2 weeks after launch. So it was a live service game that only existed in the wild for about 14 days. That's insane. 2 weeks of life for a game that reportedly cost hundreds of millions of dollars and took nearly 8 years to make. To give you perspective, that makes it the shortest lived AAA title live service ever, right behind the Culling 2, which lasted only 8 days before being killed. And here's the kicker: the CEO responsible for this catastrophe admitted in an interview with the Financial Times that it was a costly failure. You don't say. They put upwards of 400 million and nearly a decade into this thing, and in return they earned the title of clown show of the gaming industry. So today I want to talk about why and how Concord failed so spectacularly, and why it's a lesson that mostly big developers need to learn but won't. Alright, so what kind of game was Concord? At its core, Concord was a hero shooter. Think Overwatch or Marvel Rivals. A team-based game where you pick unique characters, each with their own abilities, and then duke it out online. Sounds familiar, right? Because it is. Now, here's the first big problem: the price point. The barrier to entry for Overwatch? Free. The barrier to entry for Marvel Rivals? Free. The only time Overwatch had a paywall was back when the original launched in 2016, and even then, it was $40, which was considered reasonable back then. There was nothing else like it. We're talking almost a decade ago at this point for a game that was truly one of a kind on the market. But Concord, it launched in 2024 at $40, when its closest competitors were literally free. Concord was about as unique as the next Starbucks down the road. Maybe they thought they could replicate a Helldivers 2 moment. That game was also $40 and it blew up massively, right? But here's the difference. Helldivers 2 was chaotic, fun, and unique. Players loved dropping into alien planets, fighting off hordes of bugs and robots, laughing at the Starship Trooper style propaganda, and getting obliterated with democracy grenades. It was challenging, funny, and addictive. Concord was none of those things. It had no identity and no reason to play. There was nothing unique about Concord, nothing that made you want to load it up instead of Overwatch or even Apex Legends. Overwatch already had years of refinement, memorable maps, established lore, and most importantly, memories players had built up with their friends. Why would anyone throw that away to pay $40 for a knockoff? It's like if someone was selling a console called the Playbox that looked exactly like the PlayStation, but only had Pong and Pac-Man on it. Just hell no. It wasn't fresh, it wasn't different, it was just more of the same, except with a paywall. And here's the part that makes it even sadder. It took 8 years to make. Development began in 2016, the same year Overwatch was dominating the scene. Back then, Overwatch was brand new. Doom 2016 has just revitalized FPS games. Stardew Valley was kicking off the indie farming craze, and Dark Souls 3 and Titanfall 2 were wowing players. So many good titles hit, and Sony wanted a bigger cut of that pie. Fast forwarding 8 years, and instead of innovating, Concord released as if it was still chasing that 2016 hype. Problem is, the hype was long gone. The decline of hero shooters. By the time Concord actually launched, players had already already shifted away from shooters. There had been multiple high-profile failures in the genre already. Battleborn, dead. Lawbreakers, dead. Crucible, dead. Quake Champions, dead. Sadly, because I liked this one and it was a lot of fun. The writing was on the wall. The only hero shooters thriving were the ones that had already established themselves, or at least established themselves quickly with a firm stance that they ain't going anywhere, like Marvel Rivals later did. So Concord tried to enter a dying market with nothing unique, a hefty price tag, and no reason for anyone to care. On top of that, Concord fell into the dreaded live service market. The market people are just sick and tired of. Live service games cost money to maintain. They require servers, constant updates, and new content pipelines. And to justify those costs, studios usually flood them with microtransactions, or, macro transactions, as it's just copy-pasted from the last live service game. Skins, cosmetic, battle passes, emotes, you name it. Now, to their credit, Concord launched with none of that. No overpriced skins, no $30 haircuts, no Fortnite-style cash shop. But here's the issue. They admitted all of that was planned for later, and players knew it. Gamers are tired of live service nonsense. Sure, if a game is incredible, people will tolerate it. But if your game is mediocre, the thought of an upcoming cash shop squeeze is enough to make people nope out immediately. And Concord wasn't incredible. I mean, actually, I guess it kind of was incredibly bad. Wrong kind of incredible, though. Another strange design choice was the lore problem. The devs clearly wanted to build a rich universe. They made animated shorts, cinematic trailers, and lore videos. The problem? None of it was in the actual game. If you wanted to learn more about the characters, you had to Google them, check out fan wikis, or sit through out-of-game videos. Even then, you walked away feeling like you never got the full story. Imagine if all of Overwatch's character interactions were stripped out, and the only way to know who Reinhardt or Mercy really were was to watch YouTube outside the game. That's what Concord did. Instead of focusing on fun gameplay, they dumped millions into background lore that almost no one engaged with. A better use of that time would have been even just small story missions, in-game cutscenes, or character banter before and after matches. Anything to make players actually care. A lot of critics said the hero shooter market was just oversaturated, but was it really? When Concord launched, the only big hero shooter dominating was Overwatch 2. That's it. And yet, just months later, Marvel Rivals released, and it took off. It even managed to dethrone Overwatch. So the market clearly had room, which means Concord didn't fail because there were too many options. It failed because it just, sucked. Let's go over the character design disaster. This is going to be a little controversial. When you look at mainstream shooters, Overwatch, Valorant, Apex, hell, most every big game cover, you'll notice one thing in common. Their box art or promotional material always features a hot girl. Almost always. Attractive characters sell. That's just marketing. I mean, look how movies do it. Even if you don't care about skins or cosmetics, characters with style make people interested. Overwatch is practically infamous for its fan art culture, adults fan art culture, and Marvel Rivals pushes out flashy new skins constantly. Concord, they went the opposite route. Instead of diverse but cool looking characters, they delivered some of the most forgettable plastic looking designs possible. Some looked unrealistically overweight, others like they hadn't eaten in months, and almost all of them looked like they shopped at the same Old Navy clearance rack. Bright colors, no edge, no substance. You can absolutely make unconventional characters look cool. Fat Thor in Avengers, awesome. Roadhog in Overwatch, iconic. But Concord's roster, completely forgettable. No brooding anti-hero, no badass armored juggernaut, no mysterious trickster, just a group of bland Saturday morning cartoon rejects. Worse, the game's clumsy attempts at inclusion managed to piss off both sides of the internet. Players who were anti-LGBT complained, and people within the LGBT community criticized how poorly represented the characters were. That's the worst of both worlds. You don't win new fans, and you alienate the ones you wanted. And then there was the marketing, or really the lack of it. Even seasoned gaming journalists admitted they had barely heard of the game before it launched. Some people didn't even know it had a beta. The advertising that did exist was confusing and unappealing. Compare that to Helldivers 2, which had brilliant viral campaigns, or Apex, which launched with no marketing but had the backing of big streamers ready to show it off at day one. Concord launched with a whimper, and it never recovered. On top of the fact that everyone who had heard of it kinda hated it for one reason or another. Maybe it was the $40 to buy it, maybe it was the lack of lore, maybe it was the super silly character designs. Either way, no one cared about this from day one. No buzz, no hype, no second thoughts. When all was said and done, Concord sold fewer than 25,000 copies. Peak concurrent players on Steam, less than 700. For a game that cost $400 million to make, that's catastrophic. Like Titanic levels? No. Like Hindenburg? Yeah, more people died in Titanic, so let's go with that. At least I think more people died. I don't know, I failed history. Sony immediately issued full refunds and shut down the servers. By October 2024, they closed down Firewalk Studios, the developer behind it. That's how badly it tanked. So, what can we learn from Concord? Don't enter a competitive genre without something new to offer. If your game feels like a clone, people won't leave their current favorite for it. Free to play is the standard for live service games. If competitors are free, you can't charge $40 unless your game is truly groundbreaking. But even then, chances are people will just stick to the free version. Lore is pretty much worthless if it's not in the game. Nobody wants to do homework to care about your characters. To my knowledge, Destiny is the only game that gets away with this crap. Design matters. Characters need to look memorable, stylish, and marketable, and probably hot and sexy. People like eye candy, man. This isn't rocket science. Marketing is everything. If no one knows your game exists, no one will play it. And no, not all press is good press in the gaming industry. If people are talking shit about your game months before it launches, you are gonna have a game that's dead on arrival. In the end, Concord didn't just fail, it collapsed in record time. Not because the hero shooter genre is dead, not because live service games are always doomed, but because it was generic, overpriced, and unremarkable. It's proof that you can pour almost $500 million into development, but if you don't make something people actually want to play, it won't matter. Concord will go down in history as one of the fastest, most expensive flops in gaming. A cautionary tale for big studios chasing trends instead of making fun games. Will the industry learn from this? God, I hope so. But let's be real. No, they will not. There have been so many AAA titles that have flopped in just the last 5 years, but Concord is definitely the worst. I mean, come on, 700 players at peak on launch? I'm pretty sure Spider-Man 1 for the old PlayStation has more players right now than Concord did at peak. Don't worry though, guys. Sony is releasing another remaster of another game next month, so people can just buy that and feel some semblance semblance of happiness. That, who am I kidding? It's probably next week, as it seems all they can do now is remasters. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, I think you gotta like and sub. I think it's the law or something. Alright, well, have a good day and see ya.